Hey everybody, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jan, also known as Sydney Plant Guy, and I love growing large aeroids indoors. In today's video, I'm gonna repot my Philodendron gloriosum. It just reached the end of its pot, so I wanna take you along, and I also wanna show you a really cool propagation tip that I used with this plant. Before we get started, I'd really appreciate if you would subscribe to my channel, put on the notification bell so you're informed about any new video that I upload. Give this video a thumbs up and leave a nice comment if you enjoy it. So, about 4 months ago, my Philodendron gloriosum was about to reach the end of its pot. I've got it in this rectangular pot over here that I just found on Amazon, and I'll leave a link in the description as well. Now, that pot is really nice, and the reason I chose this pot is because it's kind of the least ugly rectangular pot I can find. The reason I chose a rectangular pot is because gloriosum is a crawling plant, meaning that it's crawling along the forest floor in nature. So I'm not giving this plant a moss pole like I do with most of my other plants. This one's actually just going to be totally fine crawling along the surface of the potting medium. So I obviously wanted to give it a rectangular pot so it has more room to actually crawl. But around 4 months ago, I noticed that this plant is going to get really close to reaching the end of its pot. I don't necessarily want it to reach the end of the pot, or I mean, what it's done right now, it's kind of started crawling outside of the pot. So you might be able to see all of these cute little roots that are popping out of that newest node. Normally, all of these roots would make contact with the substrate and grow into the substrate, growing a larger root system. So I don't like this plant hanging over the edge of the pot because all of these roots are going to look for something to attach to, and there's just nothing there. So basically, growing these crawling plants is like growing something on a moss pole, just horizontally, right? So rather than vertically. And it's just really the preferred growth pattern of this plant. I often get asked if you can force crawlers to climb and vice versa. I personally wouldn't recommend that. Why would you want to force a plant to grow against its natural growing habit and then expect the best possible results? You will always get the best results if you grow a plant in line with the way that it naturally wants to grow. So it is definitely time for a repot. But what I've done 4 months ago, when I realized it's going to reach the end of its pot really soon, I took a really sharp, clean knife and I cut the stem in multiple spots. At this stage, really only this half of the plant still had leaves. The rest kind of dropped all of its leaves, or I had to cut the leaves because they had too much spider mite damage. So really that bottom part of the pot was just really empty and ugly. So I took a knife and I cut in 4 spots. So I basically have that mother plant, that bit, but now I also have 4 smaller stems. And I didn't repot anything, I didn't do anything, it just started reshooting. So I'll pop in a video over here from July. You can see that there's small little growth points coming out from these stem pieces. And then in September, you can see that they're slowly starting to actually pop out small leaves. And now I've got all of these small little plants over here. So I kind of I propagated this plant without any sort of effort. Also without any risk. It's very similar to the way that I use moss poles to propagate my plants, just that all of this is done vertically. Over here, I do the same thing, just horizontally. So because every single node has already grown roots into the potting medium as it was crawling along the surface, every single plant was pretty much able to establish itself really, really quickly. So in today's video, I want to take this plant out of its pot. I want to pot it into a larger rectangular pot, and I'm going to put all of these plants in there to create a nice lush display. So I have no idea what size this pot actually is, but yeah, I found it at Bunnings. It is not very pretty, I have to say. I don't like the look of it, but looking at these sort of decent sized pots, I don't really had much choice, but I had to go with this one. And what I really like about it is that I can take it off that little saucer. So I can just take this whole thing into the bathtub, for example, and just water it thoroughly and let all of the water drain out. So there's plenty of drainage down here. Now, when it comes to crawling plants, if we're thinking about the way that they grow in nature on the forest floor is kind of always wet, right? Especially in these tropical rainforests where these plants like to normally grow. So I'm gonna use my normal aeroid mix, but I added a little bit more cocoa peat because cocoa peat has good water retention, because these plants don't really want to fully dry out. Because I have a little bit more cocoa peat in here, and because it's not on a moss pile, so gravity isn't so much of an issue, I reckon I'll be able to get away with watering this just every couple of weeks. Because it's such a large pot and because there's so much medium, the medium is not going to dry out that quickly. But of course, it also depends on the size of the plant. If the plant grows really, really large and needs to support large leaves, then obviously it's going to need more water, and then I might need to water it more frequently. But I reckon with this pot, I'm going to be able to just water it around about every 2 weeks. All right, let's put this aside and let's have a look at what this root system looks like over here. Okay, so these pots, what I really like about them is they kind of just hover over their like planter down below, which kind of might, some of these roots grow crazy, because when I water it, there's a bit of water that accumulates in that white pot down below, and roots are attracted to water, so they kind of try it and find their way into the water. So that's really good. But it hasn't gone too crazy, so I can definitely try and save all of these roots. I've done the same thing with my Dean McDowell a couple of weeks ago, and it had so many roots down there, it was crazy. I actually lost quite a lot of them trying to get them, trying to free them from the pot. All right, so that's a bit of a challenge. Let's see how we can do that. These roots are definitely stuck. I'll try and gently free them where I can. Okay, all right, I wasn't able to save all of them. Some of the roots were a little bit too big to fit back through the holes, but that's okay. All right, let's have a look. So we've got, of course, all these kinds of root systems are very much tangled up. I think the rest. Some of these roots don't look too healthy, actually. That's okay, not all of them. Interesting, the roots don't actually look that super healthy. Didn't stop it from reshooting, so that's okay. Look, I just pull on some of these roots, see if it had root rot. Yep, this one, for example, had root rot, so that's not good. But it has one root that's healthy. But this one also had a little bit of root rot. I don't know what it is with me and crawling plants, honestly. I have a much harder time growing crawlers than growing climbers. Okay, I think that is it. And I mean, this is the main one that I want to keep. This is, you know, the main plant I want to continue growing. Those roots look really good. I like this. I'm not going to disturb the root system too much. I'm going to keep most of this substrate in here as it is. I just shake it out a little bit, but I don't want to disturb the root system too much. Now, normally I would reuse as much of the substrate as I can, but given that I've discovered a little bit of root rot in here, I'll probably not gonna reuse it, because root rot is caused by bacteria. The bacteria thrives if there's a lack of oxygen, or basically when you overwater. But yeah, so maybe it would be a good idea to remove as much as I can, but without really harming the roots. Okay, I'm happy with that, but that means I'm not gonna reuse this mix indoors. But what I will do is all of these, like when I have leftover mix, I never throw it away. I just use it for plants that I repot on my balcony, and I'm not too fussed about my balcony plants anyway. So, okay, let's park all of this on the side for now. Let's put down a little layer of aeroid mix in that pot first. And also, given that I just discovered a little bit of root rot in there, I've actually decided to add a little bit more bark back to my aeroid mix to make it more aerated and have better drainage. So So I just put down a decent layer of aeroid mix just so the roots don't straight away grow out of the pot already. But the challenge I always have when I pot up any crawlers is that I obviously want to pot it up, and the stem is supposed to kind of hover over the surface, but at the same time I also don't want it to be wonky, right? Until the roots really establish themselves and grow into the mix, it's kind of really hard for the plant to be stable, especially if you just make the stem kind of hover on top of the surface. Actually pot it up so the stem in itself is covered by a little bit of aeroid mix as well. I'm not worried about it rotting because of the stem being under some of the aeroid mix, because the mix is so chunky now that I think that will be fine. I mean, you can already see it wants to like fall, you know. I also don't want to compact the mix too much, so whoop, that seems to work. Beautiful. Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly show you, see how the stem in itself is kind of really digging itself into the potting medium. It comes out a little bit over here, but down there, I also made sure that I kind of cover it with quite a bit of potting medium just to keep it stable. Otherwise, it would be rocking back and forth a lot, especially while it's still waiting to establish itself in that new pot. I would be really careful. Now, I'm going to take the other cuttings. Honestly, this one, I don't know if this one's going to survive, but all I can do is give it a try. And I'll just put them in here as well. Just in like random spots. Obviously, I'm going to make them all crawl from this side to this side. So I'm going to make this side face the window. I'm going to go take it to the balcony and just water it very thoroughly, making sure that a lot of water drains out the bottom of this pot as well, just to really flush out any sort of smaller particles and dust that is currently still part of this aeroid mix. And then probably, as I mentioned before, I'll get away with just having to water this once every couple of weeks, but I'll definitely keep you informed. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I was able to show you how easy it can be to propagate your plants without actually really needing to propagate them. I'm propagating them while the mother plant is still growing, while they're still all within the same pot. A little bit unfortunate that I discovered a little bit of root rot, but you know, these are lessons learned. So as a result of finding that, I was able to just quickly amend my mix and make sure that the new mix is more draining and has better aeration. So lesson learned. And the plant still seems to be happy, so it's a positive. All right, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Bye.